I found out my husband was cheating on me the day after our daughter's 10th birthday party. The cake was still in the fridge, pink icing, her name written in shaky letters, because my hand had been trembling from exhaustion when I decorated it. Balloons were deflated on the floor, the smell of burnt candles still faint in the air. And yet, none of that compared to the smell of the perfume I didn't own, lingering on his jacket. I almost didn't notice it at first. He had tossed his blazer over the back of a chair like he always did, and I was gathering plates from the dining table. But when I bent down to pick up a paper cup, the scent hit me. Too sweet, too strong, and absolutely not mine. He was upstairs in the shower, the water running, his humming muffled behind the door. I remember standing in the kitchen with that blazer in my hands, staring at the label inside, as if it could tell me something. He had bought it last month, a promotion gift to himself, he'd said. The thought came quickly, without warning. I should check the pockets. I don't know why I did it. I'd never gone through his things before, but my fingers were already inside, feeling for anything unusual. And there it was, a folded receipt from a hotel downtown, 2 nights ago. 1 room, 1 king bed. I sat down right there on the kitchen floor. The words on the paper blurred for a moment because I realized I wasn't breathing. When he came downstairs, his hair damp, wearing sweatpants, he looked exactly like the man I'd been married to for 12 years. He kissed my cheek, asked if I wanted to order takeout for dinner. I said nothing. My hand was still in my pocket, the receipt balled up inside my fist. I followed him into the living room. He turned on the TV. I watched him laugh at something on the screen, his legs stretched out, looking so comfortable. And I wondered how many times he'd sat like that after being with her. I didn't ask him right away. Instead, I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and typed the hotel's name into my phone. The website loaded instantly. Polished photos of white sheets, tall windows, and champagne glasses. The kind of place you don't go to just sleep. There was a number listed for reservations. I called it. My voice was steady when I asked for a copy of the bill from 2 nights ago. They told me they couldn't give out that information without confirmation from the guest. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped the phone on the bed. That night, I barely slept. I lay there next to him, listening to his breathing, counting the seconds between each one. My mind kept replaying every late meeting, every unexplained business trip, every time he'd taken a shower the second he got home. By morning, I knew I couldn't keep it in. Over breakfast, while our daughter was still asleep, I put the receipt on the table between us. He glanced at it, then at me, and I swear I saw something in his eyes close off completely. He didn't ask what it was. He didn't pretend not to know. He just stared at the paper, then pushed his chair back slowly. "Where did you get this?" he said. I told him. I told him about the smell on his jacket, about checking the pocket. My voice didn't crack once. He didn't answer right away. He walked to the sink, poured himself a glass of water, drank it in silence. Then he turned and said, "It's not what you think." I asked him what I was supposed to think. He looked at the receipt again. "I was meeting a client," he said finally. "We booked a room because it was a late meeting," and I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out strange, almost foreign to my own ears. "A king bed for a client?" I said. "Perfume on your jacket?" His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." Something in me snapped then. I told him I wanted the truth, right now. He set the glass down, the sound of it hitting the counter too loud in the quiet kitchen. And then he said, "It was just once. It didn't mean anything. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stood there, feeling my chest tighten like I was trapped in a room with no air. I asked him who she was. He hesitated, then said her name. I knew it instantly. One of the women from his office. The one he'd mentioned a few times in passing. Always in a neutral tone. Always so casual. It wasn't casual now. I asked him how long it had been going on. Just once, he repeated. But his eyes shifted when he said it. And that was when I knew he was lying. I don't remember the rest of that conversation. I remember his voice rising, mine staying calm. I remember him saying I was being dramatic. I remember him grabbing his keys and leaving. When the front door closed, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the place where the receipt had been. By the time our daughter woke up, I had hidden it in my nightstand. I told her dad went to work early. She asked if we could have the leftover cake for breakfast. I said yes. She didn't notice that I didn't eat any. But the smell of that perfume was still on the jacket hanging in the dining room. And I couldn't stop wondering if it would still be there tomorrow. The perfume on his jacket was still there the next morning. I walked past it twice, pretending I had not seen it, pretending I had something else to do. But on the third pass, I stopped. I took the jacket off the chair and held it to my face. It was faint now, but it was there. I knew if I threw it in the wash, it would be gone completely. I put it back and left it hanging there. I wanted to see if he would notice. He did not come home that night until after our daughter was asleep. I heard his car in the driveway, the slow creak of the front door, the sound of him setting his keys on the counter. I stayed upstairs in the bedroom. He came up a few minutes later, his face tired but not sorry. "Can we not do this tonight?" he said. I asked him if this meant talking about the woman he had slept with, or this meant my reaction to it. He sighed, sat on the edge of the bed, and rubbed his eyes like he was the one who had been wronged. "I told you it was a mistake," he said. "It's over. Can we please move on?" I told him I did not believe him. He looked at me for a long moment and then stood up. "I am not going to argue about something that is done," he said, and he walked into the bathroom. I stayed in bed, listening to the sound of the shower. My hands were clenched in the blanket so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to ask him everything. How many times? Where? Why? But I also knew I would not get real answers. Not now. The next day, I decided to find out for myself. When he left for work, I went to the dining room and checked the jacket again. The perfume was stronger, fresh. My stomach turned. I slipped my hand into the pocket. This time, there was a folded piece of paper, torn from a notepad. A phone number. No name. I took it upstairs and sat on the bed staring at it. I knew I should call. I also knew I might not be ready for what I would hear. It took me 3 hours to dial. When the voice answered, it was a woman's. Warm, confident, like she knew who was on the other end before I said anything. I asked if she knew my husband. There was a pause. Then she said, "Yes, and I'm guessing you're his wife." I didn't say yes. I didn't say anything. She went on talking. "I'm not going to apologize," she said. "He told me you two were basically done. He made his choice." I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I asked her how long it had been going on. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Long enough," she said. I hung up without another word. That night when he came home, I was in the kitchen. I put the paper with the phone number on the counter. He froze when he saw it. "Where did you get that?" he asked. I told him I found it in his jacket. He looked away, his mouth tightening. "You called her, didn't you?" I said nothing. "She's lying," he said quickly. "Whatever she told you, it's not true." I asked him why she would lie if it was over. He didn't answer. He just picked up the paper, crumpled it, and tossed it into the trash. "You're digging for things that aren't there," he said, his voice flat. I could feel something in me shifting. It was not shock anymore. It was not even pain. It was the quiet knowledge that he would never give me the truth, not willingly. The next day, I drove to his office. I told myself I just wanted to see her. I parked across the street and waited. Around noon, I saw them come out together. He was carrying a coffee, smiling at something she said. She was wearing a red coat. She touched his arm when they crossed the street. He did not look like a man who had ended something. I sat there until they disappeared into a restaurant. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard it hurt. I thought about going inside. I thought about walking up to their table. But I stayed in the car. When I got home, I went straight to the bedroom and opened the nightstand where I had hidden the hotel receipt. I placed it on the bed, then took a photo of it with my phone. I sent the photo to him with no message. He didn't respond for 2 hours. When he finally called, his voice was low, controlled. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. I told him I just wanted to make sure he saw it, in case he had forgotten. "That was a mistake," he said again. "It's done. If you keep digging, you're going to ruin this marriage." I laughed again, short, like hers. "You already did," I said, and I hung up. That night he came home early. He tried to be warm, talking about our daughter's school project, asking if I wanted to watch a movie. I answered with single words. He did not mention the woman, but I knew he would see her again, because I had been at that restaurant before, with him. It was where he took clients he wanted to impress. It was where he took me on our first anniversary. And now, it was where he took her in the middle of a workday. I sat on the couch, listening to him in the kitchen, opening cabinets, the sound of plates being stacked. My phone was in my hand, the number she'd given me still in the call log. I was already thinking about calling her again. Only this time, I would not hang up. I called her again the next morning. I waited until he left for work. I made sure our daughter was in her room, still in pajamas, distracted with her tablet. I locked the bedroom door before I dialed. She answered on the second ring. No hello, just a low, almost amused, "I knew you'd call back." I didn't ask how she knew. I asked if she was still seeing him. "Yes," she said. No hesitation. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my voice steady. "You know he's married. You know we have a child." "I know," she said. "He told me. He also told me you've been distant for a long time. That you two barely talk. That you're together for the kid and the mortgage." I wanted to tell her she was wrong. That our marriage had been fine until him. Until her. But I stopped myself because a part of me realized he had probably been telling her these things for months. I asked her how long. She said since last spring. Not once. Not a mistake. Nearly a year. I gripped the phone so hard my hand hurt. I asked if he had taken her to that hotel. "Yes," she said. "More than once." I asked why she was telling me all this. "Because you called me," she said simply, "and because I don't think he's going to leave you. I think he's going to keep both of us until one of us walks away." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I asked her if she was going to walk away. She laughed quietly. Not yet. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on the bed for a long time after that. The air in the room felt heavy. I could hear our daughter laughing at something in her game, completely unaware of what had just been said. When he came home that night, I didn't mention the call. I wanted to see if he would bring her up himself. He didn't. He talked about a meeting that went long, about traffic on the freeway, about a client dinner next week. His face was calm, practiced. After our daughter went to bed, he sat down next to me on the couch. He put his hand on my knee, like nothing was wrong. I moved away. "What now?" he said, annoyed. I asked him how long he'd been lying to me. He looked at me with that blank expression he had been using lately. "I told you. It was just once." I said her name. He flinched, just slightly, but I saw it. I told him I had spoken to her. He stared at me for a moment, then shook his head. "She's making things up." "She told me it's been almost a year," I said. He didn't deny it right away. He just exhaled slowly, like he was calculating his next sentence. "If you believe her over me," he said, "then I don't know what else to say." I told him I believed what I could see with my own eyes. He stood up then, pacing. "You're blowing up our family over nothing," he said. "Nothing." That was the word he used. I went to bed without another word. He didn't come in for a long time. When he finally did, he slept on the far edge, his back to me. The next morning, I started looking through our shared bank account. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe dinners, hotel charges, anything that didn't match the stories he had told me. It didn't take long. There were charges at places I didn't recognize. Restaurants, a boutique downtown, a jewelry store. The dates matched his late meetings and client events. There was also another hotel charge, different from the first one, a month ago. When he got home that evening, I had the statements printed out on the table. He looked at them, then at me. "You went through our account?" he said, his voice low. I told him I had a right to know where our money was going. He glanced at the papers, then shrugged. Those were work expenses. I pointed at the jewelry store. "A gift for a client," he said immediately. I asked to see the receipt. He smirked. "I don't keep them." I didn't believe him, and he knew it. After dinner, while he was in the shower, I took his phone from the nightstand. The passcode was the same as always. My hands shook as I opened his messages. Most of their conversations were gone, deleted. But he wasn't perfect about covering his tracks. A few messages slipped through. Maybe ones he thought were harmless, or maybe ones he simply forgot to erase in a rush. But he had missed a few. One from last week. "Same place as last time, can't wait." Another. "Don't forget your red coat." I put the phone back before he came out. Lying in the dark next to him that night, I thought about the way she said "not yet" when I asked if she'd leave him. I realized she didn't have to be the one to leave. She could wait. She could let me be the one to finally walk away. But I wasn't ready to make that decision. Not yet. The next day, I called her again. This time, she didn't sound surprised. She asked if I wanted to meet in person. I said yes. We chose a cafe across town. I told him I was meeting a friend for lunch. When I walked in, she was already there. Red coat, just like he'd told her to wear. She smiled when she saw me, as if this was some casual meeting between acquaintances. "You wanted the truth," she said as I sat down. I told her I already knew the truth. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Then why are you here?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her. She was younger than me, prettier, in a way that made sense for him. She looked like someone who would believe every excuse he gave her. Or maybe she already knew they were excuses and didn't care. She told me they had been to more than one hotel, that he bought her the necklace I saw on the statement, that he said he would leave me when the time was right. I asked her if she believed that. No, she said, but I'm not the one living with him every day. When I left, she didn't say goodbye. Driving home, I realized she had no reason to lie to me. Everything she said matched what I'd already found. And now, I had no reason to ask him for the truth anymore, because I already had it. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, his car was already there. I hadn't expected him to be home. I sat in my own car for a moment, the engine still running, looking at the closed garage door. It was too early for him to be back from work. When I walked inside, he was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a beer in his hand. He didn't say hello. "Where were you?" he asked. I told him I had lunch with a friend. He stared at me for a few seconds, then took a slow sip from the bottle. "Which friend?" I didn't answer right away. I could feel the air between us tightening. He set the beer down and took a step closer. "You've been acting strange for weeks. Are you following me?" I laughed once without humor. "No, I don't need to follow you." His eyes narrowed. "Then what are you doing?" I said nothing. He studied my face like he was trying to read it. "You talked to her again, didn't you?" I didn't confirm it, but I didn't deny it either. He turned away, grabbing his beer again. "She'll say anything to break us up. She's obsessed." I almost told him everything she'd said, but I stopped. I realized I didn't want him to know how much I knew. Not yet. That night at dinner, our daughter chattered about a school assembly. He smiled and nodded at her, his expression soft, like nothing was wrong. I watched him cut her chicken into small pieces, the same hands that had held another woman's face, another woman's body. After she went to bed, I cleared the dishes while he watched TV. I didn't speak to him. When I finally sat down on the other end of the couch, he muted the show. "We can't keep living like this," he said. I asked him what this meant. "You giving me the cold shoulder, acting like I'm some criminal. It's exhausting." I looked at him. "You are lying to me every day. That's what's exhausting." He didn't flinch. "I told you it was one mistake. If you can't forgive me, just say so." I wanted to tell him forgiveness wasn't even the point anymore, but I didn't. The next morning, I left the house early under the excuse of running errands. In reality, I drove back to the restaurant where I had seen them together. I went inside, found the hostess, and asked if she remembered my husband being there recently. She hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. "Yes. He comes in a lot with the same woman." I asked when the last time was. She told me 3 days ago. I thanked her and left before she could ask why I was asking. On the way home, I stopped at a small electronics store and bought a prepaid phone. It felt like something only people in movies did, but I didn't want him to see the number in my call log. I programmed her number into it. I didn't call right away. I just kept it in my purse. That evening, he announced he had another client dinner the next night. I asked which client. He gave me a name I didn't recognize. The following day, I waited until he left in a suit. I gave it 20 minutes, then dialed her number from the prepaid phone. She answered on the first ring. "He's on his way," she said, before I even spoke. I hung up. An hour later, I drove to the hotel from the original receipt. I parked across the street and watched. His car pulled in. She was already there, standing near the entrance in that same red coat. He kissed her before they walked inside. I stayed until the lights in their room went on. Then I drove home. When he walked through the door hours later, he smelled faintly of her perfume again. He went straight to the shower. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the prepaid phone. The next morning, I confronted him. I told him I knew exactly where he had been, that I had seen him. He froze, halfway through buttoning his shirt. "You followed me?" "I didn't need to," I said. She told me. His face changed then, just for a second, before he pulled himself together. "You're letting her poison you." I asked him how many times he had been with her since he told me it was just once. He didn't answer. "You're destroying this family," he said finally. I almost laughed again. "You already did," I said. For the rest of the day, he barely spoke to me. He played with our daughter, made her dinner, acted like nothing was wrong. But I knew that now. He also knew. I had seen him, and I wasn't done watching. The morning after I told him I had seen them together, he acted like we had never spoken about it. He came into the kitchen in a good mood, poured himself coffee, asked if I needed gas in my car. His voice was light, almost cheerful, as if pretending could erase what I had said the day before. I didn't answer. I kept buttering toast for our daughter. When she left for school, he sat across from me at the table. "I think we should go away for a weekend," he said. "Just us. Clear our heads." I stared at him. "You mean while you're still sleeping with her?" His smile dropped. "I told you it's over." I didn't reply. That afternoon, I used the prepaid phone again. I called her, asked if she had seen him last night. "Yes," she said immediately. "We had dinner." I asked if he had told her about our fight. "He doesn't talk about you much," she said. "Only that things are tense, and that you don't understand him." I thanked her and hung up. When he came home that night, I didn't confront him. I didn't want him to know I was still talking to her. Instead, I asked about his client meeting from the night before. He didn't hesitate. He gave me a name and a location. The name was fake. The location was a place that didn't exist. I didn't call him out. I just nodded. The next day, I went to his office building. I waited in the parking lot for over an hour. When he finally came out, he was with her. They walked to her car, laughing. She kissed him before getting in. I drove away before they could see me. That evening, I put our daughter to bed early. When he came downstairs, I was sitting at the table with the printed bank statements and the hotel receipts spread out. He stopped in the doorway. "What is this?" I told him it was proof. "Proof of what?" he asked. "That you've been lying for months." He came over, glanced at the papers, and shook his head. "This doesn't mean anything." I tapped the date on one of the receipts. "This was the same night you told me you were in Chicago." He didn't flinch. I was. In the morning, I flew out after. I asked if she flew with him. His jaw tightened. "You're paranoid." I didn't argue. I just gathered the papers and put them back in the envelope. That night, I lay awake while he slept next to me. The glow from his phone screen kept flashing against the wall. In the morning, I checked our phone bill online. The same number appeared every single day, sometimes 5 or 6 times, sometimes late at night. Her number. I printed the call log. That afternoon, while he was at work, I drove to her apartment. I had never been there before, but I had her address from a background search I had paid for last week. It was a small, tidy complex. Her car was parked in front. I sat in my own car for a long time, staring at her door. I didn't knock. When I got home, I found him already there, sitting on the couch with the TV off. "Where were you?" he asked. "Out," I said. "With who?" I ignored the question and went to the kitchen. He followed me. "You can't just disappear like that," he said. I turned to him. "Do you hear yourself?" He stared at me, silent. That night, he didn't touch his phone once while we were in the living room. But when I went upstairs early, I heard him on a call. His voice was low, careful. The next day, I asked our daughter if she wanted to have a sleepover at her friend's house that weekend. She said yes, without hesitation. I had a plan forming. That Saturday night, after I dropped her off, I drove straight to the restaurant they liked. I parked across the street. An hour later, they arrived together. She was in that red coat again. He had his hand on her back as they walked inside. I waited until they were seated before I went in. I walked straight to their table. He looked up, his face going pale. She smiled faintly, like she had been expecting me. I stood there, my hands steady. "Enjoy your dinner," I said. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't look back, but I could feel both of their eyes on me until I was outside. When he came home that night, he didn't say a word. He walked past me without even taking off his coat, his jaw set tight. I could feel the tension radiating from him, but he didn't speak. Maybe because our daughter was still awake. Maybe because he was afraid of what I'd say back if he started. And I didn't ask, because now he knew I wasn't just watching from a distance anymore. I could walk right into their world anytime I wanted. He stayed out of the house most of Sunday. When he finally came home that evening, the sound of his key in the door was slow, almost hesitant. He didn't call out for me or our daughter. He just set his bag down and walked into the kitchen, like a man who wasn't sure what kind of reception he was going to get. I was rinsing plates from dinner. Our daughter was upstairs, on her bed, doing homework. It was just the two of us in the kitchen. He didn't greet me. He opened the fridge, took out a beer, leaned against the counter, and drank without looking at me. Finally, he said, "You humiliated me." I turned off the water, put the plate on the rack, and faced him. "You humiliated yourself." His voice tightened. "Do you think showing up like that changes anything? Do you think it helps?" "It changes what you can get away with," I said evenly. His jaw shifted. He put the bottle down on the counter harder than necessary. Then he walked past me toward the living room. That night, he went upstairs before me. I sat in the darkened dining room for almost an hour after he closed the bedroom door. I wanted to hear if he'd make one of those late-night calls. I didn't hear his voice, but I couldn't be sure he hadn't just gone outside or called from his car. On Monday morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee, asked if I wanted him to fill my car with gas, mentioned a project at work. I just nodded without looking up from my mug. As soon as he left, I used the prepaid phone again. She picked up quickly. "That was bold," she said. I didn't react to the comment. "What did he say to you after I left?" She gave a short laugh. "He told me you're jealous, that you've been unstable for months. He says he doesn't know how much longer he can stay married to you." I let that sit in the air for a second before asking, "Did he leave with you after dinner?" "Yes," she said casually. I hung up. That afternoon, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friend. I wrote the date and time on a small piece of paper and slid it into my wallet. The appointment was 2 days away. That night, he was unusually attentive. He asked about my day, helped our daughter with her homework, even offered to wash the dishes. His voice was warm, his movements deliberate, like he was reading from a script he'd practiced. After our daughter went to bed, I told him I was tired and went upstairs early. I didn't sleep. I sat in the guest room with the door cracked open. An hour later, I heard him walking down the hall. He was barefoot, moving quietly. Through the gap, I saw him head toward the back door with his phone in hand. I followed softly, staying in the shadows. From inside, I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I heard his voice, low, steady, almost soothing. "She's calmer now," he said. "We'll figure something out soon." When he turned and saw me standing in the doorway, he froze for half a second. Then he lowered the phone and said, "I was talking to Mark." "Mark doesn't wear a red coat," I said. He didn't reply. He walked past me, back into the house, as if ending the conversation was all that mattered. The next morning, while he was in the shower, I checked our phone bill online. The same number appeared every day, sometimes 5 times in a single afternoon, sometimes just once, always late at night. Her number. I printed the call log, folded it, and put it in my purse. 2 days later, I drove downtown to the attorney's office. I parked 2 blocks away so he wouldn't recognize the car if by chance he was nearby. The attorney was calm, efficient. She asked for dates, names, details. I laid the envelope on her desk. Hotel receipts, bank statements, phone records. She went through them slowly. "This is strong evidence," she said. "You'd have no trouble proving infidelity if it came to that." I took notes as she explained custody arrangements, property division, timelines. I didn't ask for advice. I just wanted the process explained clearly. When I walked out, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel fear either. I felt still. That night, he mentioned a late meeting the next day. I asked who it was with. He gave me a name I didn't recognize. I nodded, as if I believed him. The next day, 20 minutes after he left, I called her from the prepaid phone. "Where are you meeting him?" I asked. "Why do you want to know?" she said lightly. "Because I'm asking you." She paused, then said, "The hotel on 5th Street." I didn't hang up right away. "Why do you keep doing this?" Her voice was calm. "Why do you?" I didn't answer. That evening, I parked across from the hotel. I didn't go inside. I just watched the entrance. 40 minutes later, they came out together. She was laughing. He was holding her hand. They got into his car. I followed at a distance, keeping far enough back that he wouldn't notice. They drove to her apartment complex. She got out first. He followed her inside without looking around. I sat there for 5 minutes before driving away. I didn't need to see them come out. When he finally came home, well after midnight, he tried to slide into bed quietly. "Good meeting?" I asked into the darkness. He froze, then said, "Yeah." I rolled away from him without another word. The next day, I called the attorney's office and told them to start drafting the papers. The decision felt final in my mind, even if I hadn't spoken it out loud yet. That evening, he suggested we spend more time together as a family this weekend. I told him I already had plans for our daughter to sleep over at a friend's house. He just nodded, not asking questions. He had no idea that the only plan I cared about now was leaving. 2 days after I told the attorney to move forward, I started preparing quietly. I didn't pack bags or empty drawers. That would come later. Instead, I began making copies of every document in the house: tax returns, mortgage papers, car titles, insurance policies. I slipped them into a plain folder and hid it under a pile of blankets in the guest room closet. I also started moving small amounts of money into my personal account. Never more than a few hundred at a time, so he wouldn't notice right away. He was in a strangely good mood those days. He brought home takeout, offered to pick up groceries, even bought flowers for the dining table. He acted like a man trying to win back trust, but his phone was still always face down, his explanations still vague. On Friday night, he told me he had to work late the next day. I nodded like I believed him. I already knew Saturday would be my first real step toward leaving. That morning, I dropped our daughter at her friend's house for the sleepover. I told her I'd see her Sunday afternoon and that I loved her. I waited until she was inside before I drove away. I went straight to the storage unit I'd rented under my maiden name. I'd paid cash, so there'd be no trace. Inside, I placed the folder with the documents, a few pieces of jewelry my grandmother had given me, and some keepsakes from our daughter's early years. Things I couldn't risk losing in an argument or a sudden lockout. From there, I drove to the attorney's office to sign the retainer agreement. My hands didn't shake when I wrote the check. When I got home, his car was already in the driveway. That was earlier than he'd said. I parked on the street instead of pulling in, just to see if he'd notice. Inside, he was in the kitchen, pouring a drink. He looked at me curiously. "Where have you been?" "Out," I said. "Out where?" "Running errands." His eyes narrowed, but he didn't push. "You could have called." I didn't respond. I walked past him to the laundry room and started folding clothes that had been sitting in the dryer since yesterday. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. That evening, he suggested we watch a movie. I agreed, even though I couldn't focus on the screen. I kept thinking about the storage unit, the signed agreement, the folder sitting safe in a locked metal box. Halfway through the movie, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and excused himself, saying he needed to take the call upstairs. I muted the TV the second he was gone. His voice carried faintly down the hall. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was softer than the one he used with me. When he came back, I asked, "Who was that?" "Mark," he said again, without hesitation. "Mark calls you a lot," I said. He didn't answer. The next morning, I woke up to find him already dressed. He said he had to run to the office for a few hours. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded. The second he left, I called her from the prepaid phone. "Are you with him?" I asked. She sounded amused. "He's on his way." I didn't say anything else. I just hung up. I didn't follow him that day. I didn't drive to the hotel or her apartment. I knew that every time I got too close, I was taking a risk. She had no reason to warn him, but I couldn't rely on that forever. My visits had to be quick, careful, just enough to confirm what I already suspected without giving him a reason to change his patterns. I stayed home and went through our photo albums, pulling out certain pictures and slipping them into a separate envelope. Ones from our wedding, the day our daughter was born, family trips. Not because I wanted to keep the memories, but because I knew I didn't want him to have them. That afternoon, I got an email from my attorney with the draft petition. I read it 3 times, making small notes in the margins. The words felt cold and factual on paper, but I knew what they meant for our life. By the time he came home that evening, I had already decided when I would file. I just needed to get a few more things in place. We ate dinner in near silence. Our daughter wasn't home, so there was no buffer between us. I could feel him watching me, trying to gauge where I stood. "You've been different lately," he said finally. "Have I?" "Yeah, like you've already made up your mind about something." I met his eyes. "Maybe I have." He didn't ask what I meant. He just finished his drink and went upstairs. I stayed at the table for a long time, listening to the sound of his footsteps above me. I thought about the next week, how I'd move more of my things to the storage unit, how I'd keep collecting proof, how I'd make sure our daughter's routine stayed unchanged until I was ready to tell her. The clock in the kitchen ticked loud in the quiet house. I knew exactly how many days I had left before everything changed. By Monday morning, I had a clear list in my head of what still needed to be done before I filed. First was finishing the copies of everything: bank statements from the last 5 years, investment accounts, even utility bills. The attorney had told me to gather every piece of paper that showed our financial life, so there would be no surprises later. While he was at work, I went through the file cabinet in the office. I kept my movements quiet, listening for the sound of the garage door in case he came home early. I pulled folder after folder, laying them on the desk, separating what mattered from what didn't. Every important page went into my own folder, the one I was keeping out of the house. When I heard a car outside, my chest tightened, but it was just the neighbor backing out. Still, I decided I'd done enough for the day. I put the rest of the papers back exactly where I'd found them, locked the cabinet, and took my folder to the storage unit. Afterward, I stopped at the grocery store and bought things I didn't really need, just so if he asked, I could say I'd been shopping. That evening, over dinner, he was in one of his talkative moods. He told me about some big project at work, how the team was stressed but making progress. I nodded at the right moments but didn't ask questions. I noticed that his phone stayed on the table, screen down, vibrating once but going unanswered. After our daughter went to bed, he followed me into the kitchen. "You're quiet again," he said. "I'm tired." "Tired of me?" I didn't answer. He gave a short, bitter laugh. "You think you know everything, but you don't." I met his eyes. "Then tell me what I don't know." He looked like he might say something, but then he shook his head. "Forget it." He walked out of the room, leaving his glass of water half full on the counter. The next day, I decided to find out if he was still seeing her as often as before. I hadn't checked in person since the night I watched them leave the hotel. When he left for work, I waited 20 minutes and called her from the prepaid phone. "Where are you meeting him today?" I asked. There was a pause. Then she said, "Why do you care anymore? I thought you were done chasing him." "I'm not chasing him," I said. "I'm watching." She laughed softly. "He's picking me up at 6. I didn't say goodbye. At 5:45, I parked in a spot near her apartment complex. At 6 sharp, his car pulled in. She came out wearing the red coat, just like always. They kissed before she got in. I followed them at a distance. They drove to a restaurant across town, one I hadn't seen them at before. They stayed inside for just under an hour, then came out smiling. He held the door for her, his hand on her back. I didn't trail them after that. I already knew where they'd end up. When I got home, I sat in the dark living room until I heard his car in the driveway. He came inside quietly, as if hoping I was already asleep. The next morning, I called the attorney's office to confirm the filing date. We set it for the following Thursday. That gave me 8 days to make sure everything was ready. Those 8 days felt like a countdown in my head. On Wednesday, I took a small suitcase to the storage unit and filled it with some clothes for me and our daughter, things we could leave with on short notice without making it obvious that I'd been packing. I added a few of her favorite books, a framed photo of the three of us from before everything started, and the stuffed animal she still slept with. Back at the house, I kept the suitcase in my trunk, under a blanket. On Thursday, he came home later than usual. He said traffic had been bad. I didn't even bother asking where he'd been. Friday night, our daughter stayed at a friend's house again. I told him I was going to bed early, but instead I sat on the edge of the guest bed with my phone in my hand, scrolling through the call log again. The same number. Every day, at 11:17, he went outside to make a quick call. I followed to the back door and stood there, just far enough to hear. "Yeah, she's in bed," he said. "No, she hasn't said anything." A pause. "Soon. I just have to figure out the right time." The next morning, he was back to acting normal, making pancakes, asking if I wanted coffee, talking about taking a trip to the coast in a few weeks. I didn't commit to anything. I just said, "We'll see." Inside, I was counting down, 6 days until filing. By Sunday, I had moved the rest of the items I wanted to keep into the storage unit. The folder, the jewelry, the clothes, the suitcase. Everything was in place. I left only what I didn't care about losing in the house. That night, when he suggested a family outing the next weekend, I nodded. I knew we'd never take it, because by then, the papers would already be filed. And the part of me that had been waiting for the right moment would finally be done waiting. Monday morning started like any other. He left for work at the usual time. Our daughter was eating cereal at the table, telling me about a project they were starting in class. I smiled when I needed to, answered her questions, and watched the clock on the wall. When she was ready, I drove her to school. I kissed her goodbye and told her I'd see her at pickup. She didn't notice that I sat in the car for a full minute afterward, hands on the wheel, before pulling away. Instead of going home, I drove straight to the attorney's office. The paperwork was already prepared. I just had to sign. My name went on every page, my initials in every corner. Each stroke of the pen felt controlled, deliberate. When it was done, the attorney told me they would file the petition with the court that afternoon. I nodded, took my copy of the documents, and walked out into the cold air. On the way home, I stopped at the storage unit to check everything one last time. The suitcase was still in the corner, the folder locked in the metal box, the envelope of photos exactly where I had left it. Back at the house, I moved through the rooms slowly. I wasn't packing. I was just looking at everything, noting what I would leave behind. The framed wedding photo on the mantel, his golf clubs by the door, the jacket with her perfume still faintly clinging to the collar. At 3, I picked up our daughter from school. She talked all the way home about a game they played at recess. I nodded and smiled at the right moments. She didn't notice that I kept glancing at the clock. When he came home that evening, he walked into the kitchen and kissed my cheek like always. I let him. He started talking about his day, about a meeting that ran long, about traffic on the way home. I didn't tell him that by then. The court already had the papers. After dinner, our daughter went upstairs to do homework. I stayed in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. He came in, leaned against the counter, and said, "You're quiet again." "I'm fine," I said. He studied me for a moment. "You've been fine a lot lately. Too fine." I didn't answer. I dried my hands and walked past him into the living room. He followed. "If something's going on, just say it." I sat down on the couch. "There's nothing to say." He stood there for a long time, like he was waiting for me to fill the silence. When I didn't, he shook his head and went upstairs. The rest of the week passed in a strange calm. I stuck to my routine: work, errands, school drop-offs, and pickups. He came and went as usual, his phone always nearby, his explanations always brief. On Thursday afternoon, the attorney called to confirm that the petition had been processed. The court date would be set within the next 2 weeks. That night, he mentioned taking a weekend trip soon. I just nodded. Friday evening, our daughter went to her friends for another sleepover. I told him I was going to bed early, but I sat in the dark in the guest room instead, listening. Around 11, I heard him go outside. His voice was low, almost too quiet to hear, but I caught enough. No, she doesn't know. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. When he came back in, I stayed where I was. I didn't need to confront him anymore. Saturday morning, I drove to the storage unit again, but this time I left the suitcase by the door, ready to be picked up quickly. I kept the key in my pocket. That evening, he left the house, saying he had to meet a client. I didn't follow him. I didn't call her. I sat in the living room, the TV on with the sound low, waiting for the hours to pass. When he finally came home after midnight, he looked surprised to see me still awake. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No," I said. He went upstairs without another word. Sunday morning, I picked up our daughter from her friend's house. On the way home, she asked if we could go to the park. I told her we could, but maybe later. That afternoon, I checked my email. The attorney had sent confirmation. The filing was complete, and the other party would be served within days. I closed the laptop and went to the kitchen, where he was making coffee. He looked up and smiled. I didn't smile back. I just looked at him for a moment, then turned and walked out of the room. The key to the storage unit was still in my pocket. What would you do in my place? Please write your thoughts in the comments. I will be happy to read them.